Well, what led me to Jesus and the Lord I guess, would have to be my divorce and making the decision to try to leave an abusive relationship and get help. And then um, it all backfired in my face. Going to the police and explaining the situation and telling them that I had a plan and I had a plan to get like myself to a safe place and get my kids safe, and then them just taking everything and running the opposite way with it. Not confronting my husband or my ex-husband, but they told me that they had to get his side of the story, which I knew wasn't going to end well for me. Um, but I would say that is what brought me to the Lord and kind of sort of my upbringing, because when growing up in my family, we were, Catholic or Lutheran, and when things got really bad in our lives, when stuff, got really hard, or there were certain situations that happened, we would just start going to church, and we would go to church as long as everything was broken. And then when things got better and fixed, we would stop going. There was no more need. But I would definitely say it was very much a religious mindset that I grew up with, that we had these rules and these were God's rules and we had to do these things because this is what he said. And when you act out of them, you have to say like 10 Hail Marys, or, go to a confession and do things like that. But it was okay that no matter what you did, as long as you did those things, went to confession and did whatever the priest told you to do. I moved out here from Florida in 2016 and was with my husband at the time, was pregnant, and got very sick. And um, during the course of I would say the first 3 years here, I made one friend that was outside of work. Her name was Lauren. And for some reason, I just stayed connected with her. And on Facebook, not like we didn't have each other's phone numbers or anything like that. We didn't hang out consistently, but we were acquainted and just stayed connected over Facebook. And she would post some things, and I would reach out to her with certain questions. And then I had another baby and was working full time, and then my husband at the time was working full time, and she ended up babysitting for us. And again, she was my only friend, and so when things were really, really bad in my marriage, and um, things were, it was hard for me, but I told myself that I could stay because I wanted to give my kids something that I didn't have. I came from a broken home. I had my mom and I had my dad, who is my stepdad, but he's my dad. My biological father, for lack of better terms, didn't really want anything to do with me up until recently, actually, due to his own choices and decisions. But I didn't want my kids to grow up the way that I did. And I thought that one of the reasons that I went through so many things that I did as a child was because I came from a broken home. So I wanted to keep the peace as much as possible. And it didn't matter how much I suffered, it didn't matter how bad it was for me. My kids had two parents that loved them, and that's all that I wanted them to have. But the abuse was more and more and more, and as far as like terms of how often it happened, and the level of rage and violence increased every time. And then it started happening with more than just me. It happened with members of his own family, and eventually started being directed towards my kids. And they were put in an unsafe situation, and that's when I decided to really kind of ask for help. But the laws of Colorado, they don't favor, I don't even want to say favor, they're not fair in any way to any victim of any kind. So it didn't really work out the way that I thought it was going to. And my ex-husband ended up taking my kids and leaving. And in that brokenness, I don't know if you guys know, but if you ever have felt something that you love so much that you would die for, just being taken from you because you were just trying to do what was best to keep them safe, and there was nothing that you could do to get them back, or nothing that you could do to keep them safe. And when you go to the law or police or someone that's supposed to be in a position of power to help you and they don't, it just felt so helpless. I had nothing, no family here. I was by myself. All I had was my friend Lauren, who knew the Lord and went to this church. And this church, by the way, is not anywhere close to me. It's like a 40-minute drive if you're doing the speed limit. But I just, for some reason, knew that that's where I had to go. And I started to go to church with Lauren, and eventually I started to go on my own, and I didn't really understand a lot of things because I grew up in such a religious household. I didn't really, know what they say or what they meant when they say Jesus loves you, or I didn't know what they meant when they say that God loves you, and that this is how much he loves you so much that he sent his only son to go and bear the burden of your sin and take that penalty from you. I didn't really know what that meant. I mean, people say it all the time, and you're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But it was a long learning process to really understand. And through the process of him healing me and going through my divorce and going through, those things with trying to reconcile whatever was left of a relationship with my ex-husband for the sake of the kids, keeping them at the focus and being the best interest. I realized that there was a lot of other things that I was not healed from. Growing up, my mom, just to kind of preface this, my mother and I have a great relationship now. It's nothing like it was when I was growing up. Growing up, we did not like each other. My mom was purposely mean to me on purpose out of all of the kids because she felt like I could handle taking her abuse or being the brunt end of her abuse. But it was just other things too, growing up from a childhood of being entrusted with family, and that family ended up hurting me, being sexually molested, sexually abused, forced into doing sex acts at the age of a toddler, 3-4 years old, on another person while someone else watched. And then that kind of cycle of abuse just repeated my whole life. So for my whole life, I just thought that I was as good as what I could give to someone else. And I only thought that I was as good as just giving my body to someone else. My mom always compared me to my older sister. My older sister is blonde hair, blue eyes, and she's taller than me. I'm pretty short. And she's skinnier than me, and it's just internalized a lot of those things. But I knew that I had a body that I could get attention from someone else that way. Then when I was 14, I started working at my first legal job. I say my first legal job because before I was cleaning offices because I wanted a cell phone. And my mom told me I could have one, but I had to be able to pay for it. So I started cleaning offices, and then when I was 14, I got a taste of independence and freedom and got an actual job where I had to give a driver's license and or an ID and a birth certificate, and started working there. Um, the the managers at that company, all of the male managers, I should say, slept with all of the underage employees. And when I was 15 years old, I went to, I guess, a party that you could say was with the managers and some of the other employees. And something that I did do from a young age was drink alcohol a lot. I was at the party and was drinking and ended up getting raped by the manager. And the area that I grew up in, you could very much say was ghetto. I mean, you didn't snitch, and with the relationship that I had with my mom, I really felt like I didn't have anyone to confide in or talk to. Not even my sister or, even my grandmother, because I knew that my grandmother would tell my mom, and I knew that my mom wouldn't see it the way that I thought she would. I knew that she would find some way to blame me because she always blamed me for everything. She blamed me for things that my older siblings did. She blamed me for things that my younger siblings did. And I just got, the brunt end of everything. And so I ended up not telling anyone. Then when I was a little bit older than that, about 16, there's no other way to call him besides a pimp, I guess, who approached me. He was older, and I knew that he was older, but, he said all the right things, told me how pretty I was, and complimented things that I normally didn't get complimented on, like my smile or my eyes, and things like that. And it was just very much like I started out as like an emotional based connection and just things that I've always wanted to hear and never heard it until this guy came along. And then that ended up turning into a physical a physical thing. And then it turned it into not just being physical and having sex with him. It was, well, I love you so much and you love me so much. You need to go and do this with this person. And ended up being trafficked out at the age of 16. And it was for, I want to say, almost about a year. 10 months, 8 months. And then it got to the point to where he was jealous and decided that he no longer wanted me to sleep with other people. It was just back to just me and him. And that I was too pretty. That's what he said. He said I was too pretty to be doing things like the other ones. I was just pretty enough just to be with one person. It just had to be him. And I didn't care because he gave me alcohol, and he would let me drink and take it and leave with it, and I would still go to school. I would do things that I was still normally doing, still working my job, but I would bring alcohol with me everywhere I went. I would bring it to high school. I would bring it to work. I'd bring it home. And I would leave when he would tell me to leave, and then I would come back when he said I could come back. Then that situation started to get scary. Um, there were times where I would want to leave and he wouldn't let me, and he would pull a gun out on me. um, and I mean, at that time, I didn't have any fear. I don't know how to explain it. It didn't do what he thought it would do. And looking back, I realized how reckless I was back then. But he would just try to use acts of violence and make me stay. And then I remember one time I came home. It was like 4 a.m, and I would go through a window. And my neighbor was outside. He's younger, like me. And he actually told my parents what was going on, and my parents called the police because I had left my window open, and it had looked like someone tried to break in. And he told them everything. And I remember being unbelievably scared at that point because my parents forced me into talking to the police, and I didn't want to. My parents forced me into doing things that I didn't want to, trying to build a case and build evidence. And I just got more scared of how my mom and my parents were going to react than this person who was dangerous and threatened me with a gun, what he would do. And then because of that situation, we started to go to church, and things got better in my life, and then we stopped going. And I'm still working at the company I worked for. I've worked there for 6 years, 7 years, starting at the age of 14. And I remember he came in one time, and that was like the first time that I had been like paralyzed with fear, and I didn't know what to do. And I remember getting underneath the table and crying and freaking out, not knowing what to do. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and there was a wall, and he couldn't see me. And I just remember climbing under the table and crying. I was never so scared in my life. And I called my dad, and then he called my mom. And my dad, he was like, "Why didn't you just call the police?" And I said, "What was I going to do? Tell them that this person was here, that you guys called the police on him?" And when they were interviewing me and stuff, I denied everything and, told them nothing, that I was going to say there's this man who raped me and threatened my life, that he was here. They didn't think that they would believe me. And then after that, I still continued to drink heavily after that moment. I remember that. And then I graduated high school and reconnected with an old friend and met this guy. Started a relationship with him and moved in together. And my little brother was always around. His friends were always around. And he ended up growing weed and taught my little brother how to grow weed, how to do all the things that was necessary to sell it. And I was pregnant. And I remember I went and confided in my mom. And this was one of the things that I felt was, I guess, kind of like a test to really see if our relationship had gotten any better. But my mom was, the same as she was when I was growing up. My mom was unmedicated and had mental illnesses and that she struggled with, and she was manic a lot of times. And I remember when I came home and told her that I was pregnant and that I needed to move back in and I was scared, there was just fighting all the time. My dad was a drunk and he would sit outside and just drink and pretend like, that everything that happened inside wasn't happening, that my mom wasn't doing the things that she was doing. There wasn't fights going on that were going on. Her and my sister fought. My sister moved out around the same time. And I thought, like, how am I going to be a mom? How am I going to be a mom with a guy that is a bad person, was a drug dealer? And I was like, I even taught my little brother how to grow weed and what he needed to do to sell it. How am I going to raise a baby with a person like that? How am I going to do all of these things? Like, I could barely take care of myself. And I thought I could, though. And I was like, well, I could move back home. And I moved back home, and my mom and my sister were fighting, and my sister was pregnant too. And my sister didn't agree with some things that my mom said. And my mom was very much, this is my house, these are my rules, and if you don't like it, get out. And I remember going home, and my sister was packing her stuff in trash bags, and my mom was just sitting there yelling at her and throwing stuff at her. And I thought, well, if I go home, this is my only option. How can I bring a baby into this? And on top of everything else that happened to me, starting at the age of 3, I didn't want what I went through to happen to a baby. So I made an appointment at a Planned Parenthood that my friend went to when she was pregnant. She was 15 and pregnant. I remember her going to this Planned Parenthood and receiving OB services. And I went there thinking that it was a pregnancy center, because that's what I thought Planned Parenthood was at the time. And they didn't even ask me anything. They just automatically assumed that I was there for an abortion. And I said, well, don't you guys, like do like ultrasounds and, do like OB services? And they said, no, we don't do that anymore. We stopped doing that years ago. And they said that if you need an abortion, like you have to go to the Planned Parenthood in Fort Lauderdale. We don't do abortions here. We only do like STD testing and birth control. So I told my grandmother, who I'm a lot closer with than my mom, even still to this day. I'm closer with her. And I told her that this is what I had to do. And she took me to the Planned Parenthood. When I went there, and I remember waiting for hours. And the whole time, I just remember thinking, I don't want to have an abortion. I would want to keep my baby, but how am I going to do it? I can't move out on my own. I don't have support. I don't have anything. I'm going to trust a stranger to watch my baby while I go to school or I go to work. Look what happened to me. And I was left with family. And I decided that that was my only option. That I was early enough along in my pregnancy that it would be okay. And that I didn't want what I went through to happen to my baby. So I ended up having an abortion. They told me that when they brought me back in the room, they ask you, like when was your date, your last menstrual period, and those things. And they said that we can do the procedure or we can just give you a prescription and you go home. And I said, I'll take the prescription and go home. I didn't want to be there any longer than I had to. And they said, okay, you're going to bleed a lot. Make sure you change these pads that we give you. And that was it. They did not prepare me for anything during the process. The blood pressure drops, how I would feel, how much pain I was in, anything like that. So, going through all of the things with my divorce brought back a lot of these things up that I thought was buried down and that, wasn't going to ever bother me again. They were gone. They were done. And, I remember just being in church one day and just sitting there and praying, and there's just so much that I have with like trust issues. And not that I didn't believe in God, I knew of God. I just never had a one-on-one relationship with God or a one-on-one relationship with Jesus before. And I was praying, and all he said was, "Do you trust me?" And I said, yes, I do. And he said, then you have to give it all to me. You have to surrender it all. You have to surrender everything. That these things that I went through, I was not supposed to go through alone. And that he wanted to heal me and tell me about the plans that he has for my life. And surrendering everything to him was really, really hard. Because it was hard for me to trust him. But he is faithful to all of his promises. He is faithful in everything that he says about you, about who he says that you are, or that I am. And I have seen him do wonderful miracles in my life. I have a relationship with him. I have a relationship with my mom. I have a relationship with both of my dads, my biological father and my stepdad, who's my dad. My mom is a woman of God now. She prays, she goes to church. So is my grandmother. They are planted in church and they go to church. My little brother goes to church. My other siblings are going to church. He's restoring all of these things that I thought were broken in my life.
Tell me a little bit about what you're doing now.
I am involved. Hang on. I am involved in a few different nonprofit organizations, one of which is a pregnancy center here in Colorado, called Alternatives, or You Have Alternatives. And they really want to open the discussion on abortion or choosing life. And they've reached a lot of women that thought that they didn't have a choice like me other than having an abortion, and are able to get resources they need to be able to choose life. Another nonprofit that I'm involved in is called Let Them Live. And they are a faith-based organization that reaches moms that have scheduled abortion appointments and talk them through the process, offer counseling services, and help them navigate the conversation and discussion of choosing life or choosing abortion. And they have actually found that 73% of women that choose abortion only do so due to financial insecurity and instability. So the moms that end up choosing life step out in faith and put their faith in something that they cannot see and trust that there is going to be something better for them. And they actually raise a lot of money for these women and help them. There was just a mom recently who is a mom of three already, and was facing eviction and had her car repossessed and had scheduled an abortion. And they were able to raise enough funds to get her back in her apartment and to help get her vehicle back. And they're still raising funds for her, but that's what they do for all of these women. There are other events coming up, and I think it's the week of the 12th. We have the March for Life here in Colorado, which I'm going to be doing that. But there's other events that are going to be going on all across the United States for that.
What advice would you give to a young girl that's struggling right now with hope and that just needs options and just really struggling right now? What would you say the first step for her to be to surrender herself to God and to find hope?
What I would say uh, is just have the opportunity to love on her. Before I came in here, I was praying and, I was really seeking the Lord on this and, asking him, why God, why are all these people broken? Why are all these people, going through things that they go through? And he said, it's because that they don't know, they don't know my love. They don't. And I just think about all of the people, even me as a younger person, or even another young woman, that there is someone out there who loves you unconditionally. And it's not like the love of a parent. It is truly unconditional. That no matter what you do, no matter where you go, no matter what you've done, no matter what, that there is a father that is waiting for you with his arms open to embrace you and to hug you and to take everything that you're holding from you. And all you have to do is just trust him and just take that one step of faith.